iPhone 5S. So I had to go to an Apple store here in St. Louis and wait in line for a few hours to get this bad boy because the gold one especially is in very, very short supply. So honestly, by the time you're watching this video, if you don't have one already, you're probably not gonna be able to get one till October. But as you can see here, this iPhone 5S box is very similar to the box of the iPhone 5. Small, sleek, compact, just what you need inside of the box. And so I just took my unboxing knife to this bad boy, and now I'm ripping off the plastic, and now let's go ahead and lift off the top lid and go ahead and take our first look at this iPhone 5S. You can see the gold trim going around the edge. It looks very, very stylish, very classy for a phone just by adding this gold touch. But let's go ahead and lift this iPhone 5S out of the box. I'm going to take a look at the contents of the box. Now, as I lift off this middle divider here inside of the box, you'll find all the normal stuff. You'll find the USB power adapter, you'll find the Lightning to USB cable, and also you'll find the Apple EarPods that have the inline remote control and microphone. And then, like always, you'll find kind of the quick start documentation. Then also you'll find the 2 Apple stickers that comes with basically everything. And now it's going to get this iPhone 5S undressed and naked by taking off the plastic on the front that's protecting the screen and also the plastic that's on the back plate. And now we're able to see the gold plating there in all of its glory, I guess. So anyway, it's a very nice sleek touch. Again, the overall design of the iPhone 5S really is not changed from the 4S. You can see everything is pretty much in the same spot where the SIM card is. And you notice that the volume buttons and the mute/orientation lock switch are in the same spot. At the top, you will find the power button / sleep wake button, and then at the bottom you will find the 3.5mm headphone jack, the speaker, and also the Lightning port. And now moving on to the biggest feature of this iPhone 5S is actually inside of the home button, which now houses a fingerprint reader. So now you'll be able to place your finger on there after you set it up, and you'll be able to unlock your phone or buy stuff in iTunes with your finger. And I'll go in more detail about this Touch ID feature in another video. Now, the display on the iPhone 5S is the same exact display that's on the iPhone 5, which is a 4-inch display that's rocking a resolution of 1136 by 640 and has 326 ppi. So it's definitely not the sharpest display on the market right now, but it still is good nonetheless. And now let's go over some of the internal specs. Now, this iPhone 5S is rocking the new A7 processor, which is a 64-bit processor with the M7 Motion coprocessor to go along with that. And it has 1 GB of RAM. And as far as the camera, the rear camera is rocking 8 megapixels that can get you down to an f2.2 aperture, and also is coming with that True Tone flash. And then the front-facing camera is a 1.2 megapixel camera. Then it features LTE, Bluetooth, gyroscope, all those normal sensors that you come to expect, but it still is missing NFC. But everything else that you'll find in most modern cell phones is inside this phone.
As the rest of the iPhones out there, it's running iOS 7. It has that familiar array of icons like every other iPhone, and it's just as small. In fact, let me start by saying that yes, I'm aware that the iPhone looks very small in my hands, and that's because it is small in my hands. The Samsung Galaxy Note 3 is a phone I've carried for a while now, and it feels pretty natural for me to hold, but it's a bigger than average phone for most people, and it has a 5.7-inch display. But to me, it doesn't feel all that extreme. But a smaller, more common option that you'll probably see more frequently is the Samsung Galaxy S4. This is a pretty popular phone, and it has a 5-inch display. And it has that same general look to it as the Galaxy Note 3, but it takes up less space and involves reaching to the corners a bit less. But even smaller than that is the Moto X. This is one of my favorite devices right now, and it's very compact. It stuffs a 4.7-inch display into a body that's not that much bigger than the iPhone, so I can grip the whole thing. But even this phone starts to look big when you compare it to the iPhone 5S. This phone has a 4-inch display, so it's easily the smallest of the displays on any flagship by any company right now, but it's also one of the most compact mobile devices, period, which is something that Apple's really proud of in this phone. And I don't blame them. The device is really light, really easy to hold, and people can reach all 4 corners of the display with one hand, although I think people could do that on a 4.5-inch display too. But this is also one of the most fragile feeling phones out there. It's not actually fragile. It's really extremely well built. It's made out of premium materials like the HTC One. It's got metal in there. It's very tightly put together. There's no creaking or any twisting or anything like that. But the lack of any curves, plus the glass on the back, like the Nexus 4, make it feel like I better not drop this device. Like if I dropped it from a few inches up, it feels like it's very delicate and vulnerable to scratches, like I should be putting a case on it or something. Something else about the hardware, though, is very well crafted. We saw this in the iPhone 5, too. It's solid aluminum on the sides and the back. It has awesome buttons that are precisely crafted so that they don't wobble at all, which is nice. Plus, they have the laser etchings to indicate volume up and down. The chamfered edges are angled ever so slightly inwards, the headphone jack and the lightning port are on the bottom with the precisely milled speaker grill holes. I mean, I don't think it's just about how all of this is in such a small package that makes it a little difficult to appreciate it all, which is why I think the HTC One still feels just as good in the hand. Now, the speakers on the bottom of the iPhone are one of the more interesting parts of it. This is where Apple does its absolute best to make sure specs don't matter nearly as much as they used to. They control the entire experience from the hardware to the software, and there's a lot of optimization going on, and in the end, performance throughout iOS 7 is pretty snappy. It performs on par with just about every other flagship today that has an 8-core chip and double the RAM and 20 megapixel cameras. And iOS, as we know, never really required all that much resources to run smoothly and multitask well and not eat through battery life like a hungry wolf through steak. So it's not really a surprise that the iPhone 5S is quite fast, especially when compared to older iPhones. But how is iOS 7? Well, for me, I actually like the look of iOS 7, at least a lot of it, but its functionality is still exactly the same as iOS 6. It's essentially a layer of gloss over the top, a visual overhaul, if you will. The motto here is you'll probably like it or learn to like it, but if you don't, too bad. Because you just can't change things. You still can't customize a lot of the things that I'm used to being able to customize out of the box on something like an Android phone. In iOS 7, you'll probably like most of the new icons, but if you don't like one, or two, or several, too bad. You might like the new keyboard, but if you don't, too bad. You might love the new stock lock screen or the new dialer or all the new stock applications, but if you don't, too bad. My biggest gripe with iOS 7 was actually the animation. So every time I unlock the iPhone 5S, there's this new animation in iOS 7 that takes a solid half a second before it lets me do anything on the home screen, and I don't like that at all. And that's too bad. So now anytime I want to unlock the phone, and I already know I want to go to the second page of apps, I have to wait for the animation to finish before I can do anything, because while it's animating, it's unresponsive on the touchscreen. Still bugs me to this day. I wish I could change the animation speed, just speed it up a little bit. There's also a lot of weird little bits of fragmentation, like with the keyboard, for example, where if the app you're using isn't updated for iOS 7, it doesn't get to use Apple's new keyboard. It'll use the old iOS 7 looking keyboard, which creates a bit of visual inconsistency, and that will, I guess, be a bit of a mess until app developers get on the case and update their apps for the new OS. But overall, yeah, I like the look of a lot of iOS 7. I think it's quite nice in a lot of areas that aren't the icons on the home screen, but the functionality I still have problems with, and those still remain, and that's too bad. Now, outside of this, of course, iOS is still a great choice for a lot of people, and that obviously won't change. I mean, 10 million people bought this phone the first weekend it was available, so it's clear that people love it and want it. As a Google service user with stuff, like Gmail, Google Drive, Google Calendar, Tasks, etc., you can get most of the core stuff you need and get away with it from the App Store, so the situation is really not that bad at all. And then there are, of course, the few fringe benefits of the iPhone, like Touch ID, for example, which is the name for the fancy fingerprint sensor in the home button of the iPhone. Lets you unlock your phone or authenticate your iTunes purchases, and you can register up to 10 fingers. Of course, people have also found great ways to register things other than fingers, like their toes, their pet's toes, and even other body parts. But it's a cool feature. It works pretty well, pretty accurately most of the time. Just note that every time you restart your phone, you'll have to re-enter your whole iTunes password before using Touch ID in the App Store again. So this is a very fast camera. What I most enjoyed about shooting with the 5S's camera, though, was the low light capabilities. This thing can essentially see in the dark, where a lot of the other camera phones I've used fall short. But you can see all the test shots that I took in the full Imgur link in the description right below that like button, where you'll see, low light shots and regular light shots. And you'll see that the photos it takes are really pretty solid. The colors were very accurate, like extremely colorful and saturated. The detail was pretty much all there. It was only a little bit softer than the iPhone 5 because of the wider aperture, but overall, the shots you get out of this thing are very good. Overall, though, in terms of the quality of photos and videos you get and the control you have over them, this is up there in some of the best smartphones you can get to take photos with. So yeah, using the iPhone 5S is just as you would expect. You get great performance, smooth animations throughout, you get that super compact form factor and excellent build quality and design and material choices, and you get the usual quirks with a relatively new operating system, but those will either iron out or you'll get used to them. You get that future-proofness with the new 64-bit architecture, Apple's new chip, and Apple having control over the whole OS and ecosystem. And you have a very reliable device that almost always works exactly as you'd expect it to. Even if you don't like the way it does something, you can be confident that it'll do it that way every single time until you get used to it. It's a very familiar device for a lot of people, and probably isn't worth rushing to upgrade to if you're coming from an iPhone 5, but for many other older iPhone, it's a great choice for all its.
Let's start with some light keystrokes. Let's go ahead and inspect the damage here. So I'd say there's a few blemishes on there, but as we've seen in the past, you can go ahead and try to wipe them away, or just put some little bit of grease from your fingers on there, and they are pretty much disappear, and I don't see any blemishes. So let's go ahead and try the front screen of the device now. Let's go ahead and inspect the damage. We can definitely see some scratches on there, very faint. We have 2 right there from directly stabbing it with the key. But for the most part, it's holding up pretty well, and I'm quite surprised by it. And I'm just in awe of how great the aluminum can hold up to it and how you can just wipe away it. So let's go ahead and move on to the knife test. Alright, so now I have my kitchen knife here. It's your standard 7-inch blade. So we'll start with the light keystrokes and then start going harder. Let's go ahead and inspect the damage. So it seems that when we put it at a glare here, we can kind of see the stabbings of the knife, and that's okay. I'd say it hold up pretty well, but again, it's going to affect the aluminum on the back, but that's kind of understandable as you're taking a metal object and putting it to another metal object, and with the force you're driving to it, it's obviously going to make a mark. So I'd say it held up pretty well, but when you put it in the light, you can definitely see the punctures that we have there. So let's go ahead and move it to the front of the screen and see how it performs there. We'll start with some light strokes. Let's go ahead and inspect the damage. So it appears that the screen is pretty flawless despite the 2 marks we made when we stabbed the key at the screen. I'd say it's holding up pretty well with the screen. It's kind of just deflecting the knife, and your screen's going to stay pretty intact if you do take it to a hard object or you have many keys and sharp objects in your pocket. So let's go ahead and conclude the final test here and bring the big bag boy in. We're going to go ahead and test out the hammer on the iPhone 5S.
Alright, here we go. All right, here we go.